When Halo was released on the original Xbox, it very much cemented itself as a game to pay attention to. At the time, Microsoft was releasing its first console, and Bungie's Halo was to be the must-buy game for it. Halo delivered on every level. Bungie provided a very captivating world with characters and locations that would become iconic. While we never saw his face, Master Chief became a hero the player was empowered to play as, and oddly enough, identify with. Cortana was the voice in your head and someone you cared for. The gameplay was compelling in that it provided a variety of weapons for the player to use and that no gun was wasted. The vehicles provided even more empowerment for the player and became a staple for the series. The campaign is memorable while also having an enjoyable multiplayer that provided creativity, humor, and a lot of fun. But what does this have to do with Gearbox's Borderlands? Well, after Halo was a huge success on the original Xbox, Gearbox was then the company that they looked to port their game to the PC. And through this experience, Gearbox began thinking about their own first-person shooter. This first led them to make a very successful and realistic take on World War II with Brothers in Arms. After 2 successful entries in their new series, Gearbox wanted to make a game that combined both first-person combat with the addictive progression from action RPGs. And with that, the idea for Borderlands was born. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you a look back at Borderlands. Gearbox was founded in 1999. They started to make their mark in the games industry with expansions to the beloved Half-Life 1. Gearbox made 2 expansions for it that were pretty well received. They continued to build their portfolio with ports and PC releases of existing games. Their most successful of these was their port of the original Halo. Halo was a huge hit for the original Xbox, and Microsoft and Bungie wanted to bring that hit to the PC. Gearbox was given the task to port this popular game to the PC, and they did it with success. It was roughly the same game as it was on the original Xbox, except with one big addition. The PC version had online multiplayer, where the Xbox version only had local and LAN options. At this point in Gearbox's career, they mostly worked on existing properties, and they wanted to take a stab at creating their own. Their next project would be a World War II shooter. Brothers in Arms Road to Hill 30 aimed to provide a more realistic take on the popular World War II shooting genre. This game would heavily punish the player for acting like a one-man army, and instead wanting the player to focus on using their squad to succeed. In 2005, Gearbox released 2 entries in this new series, and the reception was very positive. At the same time, Gearbox was working on other Brothers in Arms projects while also wanting to explore something new. Gearbox felt inspired by their success with Brothers in Arms to create a new first-person shooter. They wanted to make a game that was Halo meets Diablo. The goal was to have a game that had the intense gameplay of a first-person shooter while providing the player with an extreme amount of loot. This led the developers to begin their work on Borderlands.
Not without guns. A hell of a lot of guns. Why have you come here? You're looking for the vault, aren't you? You won't find it. I'll tell you the same thing I told all those who came before you. It doesn't exist.
When Borderlands was first revealed, it had a bleak art style. It was very much in line with the heavy use of browns of that generation. Seeing eye-popping visuals and vibrant colors was not something that was expected with first-person shooters. In the conceptual stage, Gearbox played with having art styles that were sci-fi heavy like Mass Effect, or even having something more in line with Gears of War. They settled on a more serious and gritty style. As the game progressed in its development, it was tested by a group of internal testers, and they felt like this version of Borderlands looked too similar to Fallout 3. At this time, Borderlands was about 75% done, and they weren't happy with the art style for their game. Gearbox went back to their conceptual art for inspiration. From this, they thought they could use a more comic book art style to add some visual pop and flair to their game. A group of Gearbox employees worked on a prototype for this new art style in hopes to get the buy-in from their publisher. When the prototype was shown off, the publisher was happy with the switch, along with most of the Gearbox staff. Sadly, the original art director left the project due to Gearbox going in a different direction. The goal of the new style was to allow Borderlands to stick out more from the crowd by having a style that's not too cartoony but rather heavily stylized. The other reason for the switch was that the original gritty and serious art style conflicted with the tone of the action presented to the player. The action was highly exaggerated and over the top, and with that, the new art style worked together with the gameplay to create a more unified experience. Within the Borderlands trailers, they like to advertise that their game had 87 bazillion guns. The amount of guns in the game came to a little more than 16 million. To achieve this level of loot would have been extremely time consuming if these weapons were all handcrafted. As a means to provide a large variety of weapons to the player to obtain, Gearbox created a gear builder development tool to aid them in their process. Essentially, the gear builder would generate guns based on different elements. It would factor in different features of the weapons like the body, barrel, and attachments. This builder would determine how much damage the weapon would deal. The builder essentially would start with a base gun and then change the different elements to make up different weapons. You can look at it as the game had one base gun and then it was heavily modified to create new ones. This system shows how Gearbox wanted to deliver a large amount of variety to the player and found a way to effectively do that to achieve their intended goal. The same can be said for what Gearbox did to reach their final art style. As they developed their game, they realized that the visuals presented did not work for their tone or gameplay. The change made to the visuals allowed the game to enhance and work with the action, along with visually providing something different compared to its contemporaries. On October 20th, 2009, Borderlands was released to the world.
So, you want to hear a story, huh? One about treasure hunters. Have I got a story for you? Pandora. This is our home, but make no mistake, this is not a planet of peace and love. They say it's a wasteland, that it's dangerous, that only a fool would search for something of value here. Then perhaps I am a fool. But do not be fooled by what Pandora appears to be. There was a legend. Many people tell it. The legend of the Vault. My father would always go on about the Vault, even with his dying breath. Advanced alien technology. Infinite wealth, fame, power, women.
The tale of Borderlands takes place on the planet of Pandora. While on Pandora, the story follows our 4 different Vault Hunters. These Vault Hunters are on a quest to find the legendary vault. If a Vault Hunter can find a vault, then that vault will provide them with wealth, technology, and power. A guardian angel acts as their guide while they're on their journey. This brings us to our 4 heroes, Roland, Mordecai, Lilith, and Brick, and they make up the Vault Hunters. The Vault Hunters first arrive in the town of Firestone. They are greeted by a Claptrap and make their way to the town. The town is under attack and the Vault Hunters are tasked with fending off the bandits. While in the town, the crew meets Dr. Zed and TK Baha. The Vault Hunters try to help out the town by completing missions for the townsfolk. This leads to the Hunters fighting Nine Toes and then moving to fight Sledge. After defeating Sledge, the group finds that he had a piece of the key that is needed to open up the vault. The Vault Hunters receive a message from Commandant Steele of the Atlas Corporation, and she requests that they hand over the key. They ignore this request and continue to journey further into Pandora. They make their way to New Haven and are informed that the vault only opens every 200 years and it's going to open soon. The Vault Hunters help out the people of New Haven and then are contacted by Tannis to discuss the vault. Tannis has been searching for the vault and believes the legends are true. The group decides to work with Tanis to open up the vault. This leads the group to 3 large fights to obtain the remaining keys. As the Vault Hunters defeat the Baron to get the last key fragment, it's revealed that there is no 4th fragment. Commandant Steele contacts the group to inform them that she is now in possession of all the keys and that Tanis betrayed them. Steele shuts down the Echo Network, which shuts down the Vault Hunters to the Guardian. The group make their way to the Crimson Lance base to rescue Tanis and restore the Echo Network. After all of that is accomplished, the crew fight their way to the vault to stop Steele. After fighting through her forces and vault guards, they finally catch up with her.
You persist on ignoring my orders. The contents of the vault are rightfully the property of the Atlas Corporation. But you, you belong to me. Sergeant, get your team ready to go inside.
The group fights the monster that emerged from the vault. After the fight is over, the Guardian thanks the Vault Hunters, and the group collects their rewards and returns the key to Tanis.
Pandora, a planet that once knew only peace and prosperity under the fair and noble direction of the Atlas Corporation. But there were those that sought to disrupt our perfect existence. Thieves and murderers, perverts and scoundrels. The lawless garbage unleashed an unspeakable evil upon Pandora, not known since the age of the gods. But together we shall not despair. Atlas has not forgotten you. We are returning and will restore order and security to your planet. When we arrive...
Bullshit. I have choked on the disingenuous lies forged by their corporate greed my entire life.
With the destroyer defeated, the Vault Hunters are then contacted by Athena, and she asks to meet up with them since they both have a common enemy with the Atlas Corporation. Before the group can make their way to Athena, they talk to Scooter, and he helps to build them a new vehicle so they can get there. With Scooter's new vehicle, the crew make it to Moxxi's and find out that Athena was there, but she's been kidnapped by Shank. The Vault Hunters fight their way to the prison where Athena is, kill Shank, and free Athena.
Your rescue is most agreeable. Thank you.
Her plan is to find a way into General Knoxx's secret armory. The Vault Hunters work with Athena to find a way into the armory. The crew fight their way into the armory, and then they must face General Knoxx himself. They defeat General Knoxx and loot the armory and escape before it blows up. While Borderlands is light on story, it does do a good job of having some fun characters, a lighter tone, and laying the groundwork for sequels that expand on this department. Characters like Marcus, Scooter, and Tanis provide plenty of funny lines throughout the game, and the humor lands most of the time. Many criticize Borderlands for having a weak narrative, and while there is an argument for that with the ending of the game, I would say that the story that is presented is mostly light, but good, with characters that bring a lot of personality to the world. The game does put a large focus on the vault, and the destination was rather lackluster compared to the entire game setting up the vault. While I understand and agree with having a large final encounter, I think the vault should have had something more involved than just reaching it, fighting a big bad guy, and then being done. It seemed a bit rushed and lacked the proper payoff that the game was building up to. I also give Gearbox a lot of credit in that they realized that many players felt disappointed in this aspect of the game, and they even made fun of themselves with the introduction of the second game. It's rare to see a company admit their mistakes, and even use it as an opportunity to tell a good joke. Lastly, I do want to mention Claptrap. These robots have the potential to be really annoying and hurt the experience, but the voice and delivery is done with the right combination of funny and annoying that it never hurts the game, it only helps it. I did appreciate how most of the narrative is delivered through dialogue while in gameplay. It's very rare to be taken out of the game to be forced to watch a cutscene. The few that are there are pretty good, and I like how the story is delivered mostly on the fly, and the game tries to keep you continuously in the addictive action. So another strength is how Gearbox knew that the story was not the main selling point, and provided just enough to surround the game. As in, the narrative never got in the way of the gameplay. The DLCs, especially the third one, which extended the main narrative, showed how Gearbox was improving with their stories, and a good use of continued humor. While Borderlands does have an interesting world and a good cast of characters, the main reason you keep coming back is for the gameplay. Borderlands concentrates its gameplay on shooting enemies and continually chasing more loot. When it comes to controls, the game feels solid to play. Moving, aiming, and shooting are all satisfying. The shooting itself is solid, with its use of gore and impact on weaker enemies. This could include having heads explode, limbs removed, or even having enemies vaporize from being hit with different elements. The game does provide many classes of weapons to keep the shooting interesting. You have pistols, revolvers, shotguns, rifles, and more. There are many different types of guns to play with, and within those different classes are different variations, like an assault rifle that fires bursts, or a larger one that's more like an LMG. Variety comes in another way with different enemies. You have your standard soldiers and bandits, along with different forms of wildlife. What does make these encounters interesting is how they have different areas of their bodies that can provide you with critical hits if you shoot them. Like great shooters, there isn't really a class of weapon that isn't useful. It very much comes down to personal preference and the situation you're in. Along with that, each of the different character classes provides boosts when using certain weapon classes. Borderlands provides 4 different character classes. The Hunter focuses on enhancing sniper rifles and pistols. His special allows him to send in his Bloodwing to attack enemies for him. The Siren provides enhancements to SMGs and elemental weapons. Her power is to be able to go invisible and then reappear, which causes damage to everyone around her. The Berserker focuses on close combat and explosive weapons. His special move puts him into a rage where he can wildly smash into enemies. And lastly, the Soldier focuses on combat rifles and shotguns while being able to send out a stationary turret to both attack enemies and assist your allies. Each of the character classes have 3 skill trees to put their skill points into. So while you will eventually be able to earn many of the skills, there is a lot of customization and choice in how you want to build your character. The Soldier does have a focus on combat while also being a solid medic for the team and the ability to heal your teammates. While the first-person action is generally the same, the 4 different characters give you a good amount of variety in what character you want to focus on with their different perks and abilities. While you do earn experience points for killing enemies and completing quests, there's a proficiency system that's going on in the background that provides you with additional buffs based on the weapons you use. Essentially, you earn more buffs as you use a certain weapon class. I like how Borderlands continually rewards you for your playstyle, and while this system gets further developed in the sequel, this was a good solid groundwork for it right here. And while you are shooting and completing missions, you will be earning lots of different loot. This game has a ton of it. I always felt like I was earning something in this game, and I felt like that is something that's greatly wanted and appreciated when you play these types of games. You earn new and better loot at a good rate. The loot comes with different visual styles along with different scopes, buffs, and elemental properties. Like I said before, the gunplay is solid and it feels good to shoot things within the game, but what really adds to that addictive nature is you're rewarded every time you pull the trigger. When you shoot your gun, you're improving your proficiency rating, and this will result in better buffs for the guns that you like to use. Completed quests and killed enemies will provide you with new loot to use or sell, and earning experience points gives you more opportunities for class customization. Borderlands successfully combines the drive of a loot-based action RPG with the gameplay of a first-person shooter.
All right, boys, take them out!
I also like how Borderlands is fun to play in single player while also in a group. This is more of a problem with modern day looter shooters in that they can be hard to enjoy by yourself, requiring you to play with other people, which can be rather enjoyable with friends, but frustrating with random people. Borderlands feels great even if you play the entire game in single player. The story is mostly delivered on the fly, and this makes it easy so that you can focus on the action while having context to the world and quests. And sometimes you might run into audio logs that provide additional information, and I think this is probably best enjoyed in single player than in co-op so that you can really enjoy the dialogue that's taking place, where in co-op you would probably be doing more chit-chat with your friends. The game feels balanced to be able to be enjoyed by yourself or in a group. Now, some of the DLC quests are kind of more like raid situations, so you're going to need a team to beat them. But almost all the content can be enjoyed in single player without it feeling like you're in this annoying uphill battle, because the game really is balanced for co-op play. To clarify, I'm not saying co-op is bad. It's rather good, and I like how Borderlands provides options for the players. The best option is that it had split screen available. I give Gearbox a lot of credit for including this mode. During that generation, split screen was still present, but it was something that was being slowly removed from franchises or not included in new games, and as a biased fan of split screen, it was great to see. Also, I do want to mention Borderlands' use of second wind. Essentially, when you lose all your health, you go into a down state. If you can kill an enemy within a limited period of time, you'll be able to revive yourself. This is really useful and appreciated when you're playing in single player, since you won't have someone else there to revive you. This allows you to help yourself and turns what could be really frustrating into something that's this fun minigame that's extremely satisfying to pull off. Borderlands does feature large environments, and the game does provide you with a vehicle to use. The vehicle combat feels decent, with running over people being the most rewarding aspect of it. The driving itself is also decent, but you may find yourself hitting edges of areas or getting briefly stuck. It is good that a vehicle is included, but I do think this area could have been improved. As I said before, the shooting is good, and the steady amount of rewards and progression helps to feed into the addictive gameplay. But an area that I do think could be improved upon are the tactics that many enemies will use against you. You will mainly fight enemies that will charge at you to try and melee you, slowly move towards you, and then shoot at you or stand still or take some movements to the left and right. If enemies use reactive movements like ducking behind cover or flanking, this would have significantly helped the situations. The way I look at it is, if I just took the shooting by itself without any of the rewards, loot, or progression, how compelling would the shooting be? And I think the shooting is solid on its own, but I do think the reactive nature of having some of your enemies act this way would have helped. I do want to give credit to some of the enemies in the last third of the game. The Crimson Lance soldiers will occasionally try to take cover and be more reactive than some of the prior enemies. To further clarify, I do think the shooting is solid, and I only think that improved tactics from the AI would improve the overall experience. What does keep the shooting solid are the feedback from the shots, the several progression systems, and the variety of things to shoot at. While the campaign and DLCs are extensive and can be enjoyed in co-op, there's a small option for player versus player content. You can start a duel with anyone you're playing with, but this feels more like it was tacked on so that Borderlands could say it was in the game. There's some silly fun to be had with a friend, but this isn't really going to be a substantial mode that you're going to come back to.
It was here that the scientist Dr. Ned, who is totally not Dr. Zed from the last story though, tried to help all of mankind, but ultimately caused very bad shit.
That's a swear.
Dude made zombies, okay? You're not the police of me. Pay attention. Okay, so some bad crap was happening, and it got really spooky. And this is where our story begins.
Is any of this going to be true?
Yes, probably a lot of it. You're adopted.
Borderlands had a bunch of post-game content. The Zombie Island of Dr. Ned gave more solid Borderlands content. It didn't really change the game, but it provided more of what we expected at a good value. I did like how they included an intro similar to the style found in the base game. The humor was still present, and the zombie enemies were enjoyable, as was the setting. This did set a good tone for future DLCs, in that it allowed Borderlands to try these offshoot ideas without really having to be incorporated into the main narrative. The second DLC featured the introduction of Mad Moxxi, and it centered around a Horde-style arena mode. This is the DLC that felt lacking out of the bunch. I personally enjoy Horde-style modes, but I did feel like this one was lacking any sort of story motivation that the main game had, along with any lack of being able to earn experience points from defeated enemies. The best that I can say is that it looked like Borderlands, but it really lacked that addictive nature from the main game. The secret armory of General Knoxx continued the main story of the game and added a lot of content. The level cap was increased with new vehicles and improvement to the presentation and story. This DLC really showed how Gearbox was improving in the story department. The game included more enjoyable but quick cutscenes along with characters showing off their humorous personalities. Another thing I wanted to note is how General Knoxx was a step in the right direction for a good bad guy for the series. This was a department that was lacking in the main game as there wasn't really a main villain. The DLC has Knoxx and he has several humorous lines along with having a decent presence throughout the DLC. There were many new quests to enjoy as well. There was a lot here, and it gave me more confidence that Gearbox was moving in the right direction and improving their series. The last DLC, Claptrap's New Robot Revolution, features more of the same content that you would expect and something that was similar to the first DLC. The General Knoxx DLC is really the one that stands tall out of the bunch. Overall, Borderlands 1 provided a very solid base game with additional content that was mostly enjoyable. The fun characters, comic book-like art style, and addictive gameplay make this game memorable and one I want to see more of. Borderlands 1 was released, it was trying to do something different. At the same time too, this was a time during the games industry when first-person shooters were at an extreme high. Many older franchises were coming back and being turned into shooters. Gearbox saw the want for more first-person shooters and how to incorporate the loot and progression systems of great action RPGs. They wanted to blend these two types of genres to create an engaging hybrid. Borderlands was and is a great game. The world and characters were interesting, and while the story had some disappointing elements about its ending, the post-release content showed that Gearbox was continuing to improve and deliver on this series. Most of the DLC content expanded on the main game with more missions, areas, characters, and humor. The meat of the game was the gameplay, and it delivered an addictive progression-filled experience that rewarded you every time you shot your gun. Borderlands embraced players that wanted to play this game in single player and in co-op. Gearbox achieved something special with effectively creating the original looter shooter that inspired many games after it, and it still stands tall to this day.